Here is a number that should stop you cold. Only 17% of adults are genuinely flourishing, not happy in a vague social media sense. Flourishing as in psychologically thriving, emotionally alive, socially connected, and living with a clear sense of purpose and meaning. That means 83% of us are somewhere else. Somewhere between struggling and simply going through the motions. And here is the part that science finds most alarming. The largest group is not the people who are obviously suffering. It is the quiet majority. The people who are fine. Not depressed, not in crisis, just not really living. Psychologists have a word for this state. They call it languishing. And research shows it is more dangerous than most of us realize. You probably know this feeling. You wake up and nothing is exactly wrong. You are functioning. You are meeting your obligations. You are showing up. But something is missing, some quality of aliveness that you cannot quite name. You are not sad enough to call it depression. You are not suffering enough to ask for help. But you are not really thriving either. You feel vaguely stuck, vaguely hollow, like you are watching your own life from slightly too far away. Maybe you have tried to fix it. Maybe you have addressed the things that were going wrong, the difficult relationship, the draining job, the old anxiety. And yet, even after fixing what was broken, something still feels absent. That is not a personal failure. That is a scientific phenomenon, and it has a very specific explanation. In this video, I am going to show you 3 things that the research has confirmed and that most people never hear. First, why eliminating what is wrong is never enough to make you well, and what the science says you need to do instead. Second, the upward spiral mechanism, a documented neurological and psychological process that can shift you from languishing to flourishing, and how to deliberately activate it. Third, 3 science-backed tools, backed by some of the most comprehensive research ever conducted on human well-being, that have been shown to move people across the full journey from ill-being to genuine well-being. Stay until the end. The third tool in particular is one that surprises almost everyone. I did not come to this subject through books. I came to it through teenage years that were harder than I knew how to handle. Years that left me asking what it actually takes to move from merely surviving to genuinely living. That question became my life's work. I trained as a psychotherapist, studied and taught psychology in universities and organizations, and through both the science and my own journey, I found answers worth sharing. This channel is also, honestly, a personal journey. The human mind never stops surprising me, and I learn best when I share what I discover. So that is exactly what we are going to do here. Together. We are all, in different ways, on the same road. Let me show you what that road can look like, through the story of someone who walked it all the way. It is the early 1990s. Joanne Rowling is in her late 20s, sitting in a series of Edinburgh cafes, writing by hand in notebooks, because she cannot afford to heat her flat. Her marriage has collapsed. She is a single mother on welfare. She has an unpublished manuscript, and a toddler, and very little else. But here is what makes her story scientifically significant. It is not just the external circumstances that matter. It is what is happening psychologically. By her own account, this is not merely sadness or stress, or the ordinary difficulty of a hard life. This is a complete collapse of what researchers identify as the core dimensions of psychological well-being. No sense of purpose that feels real, no personal growth, no vision of a possible future. That period of my life was a dark one, she later told the graduating class at Harvard University. I had no idea that there was going to be what the press has since represented as a kind of fairy tale resolution. I had no idea how far the tunnel extended, and for a long time, any light at the end of it was a hope rather than a reality. She is not simply ill, she is at the extreme low end of both dimensions simultaneously. High ill-being, near zero well-being. The void is complete. And yet, she keeps writing, not because she is hopeful, not because she believes it will work, but because it is the one activity that gives the day a reason to exist. That distinction, purpose as a mechanism of recovery, independent of hope or mood, is one of the most important and least understood findings in contemporary psychology. And I want to explain exactly why it works. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life, Rowling would later say at Harvard. But how? And why? That is what the science answers. To understand Rowling's journey and your own, you need to understand one foundational discovery that has transformed how psychologists think about mental health. For most of the 20th century, psychology operated on a single-axis model. Mental health was imagined as a straight line, depression on one end, happiness on the other. The goal was simple: move away from the negative end, and you would automatically arrive at the positive end. The research has shown this is wrong. In 2002, psychologist Corey Keyes published a landmark study establishing what is now known as the dual continuum model of mental health. His finding was radical in its simplicity. Ill-being and well-being are not opposite ends of the same spectrum. They are two separate, independent dimensions. This means 4 states are possible, and all 4 are real. You can have high ill-being and low well-being, struggling and empty simultaneously. This is the clinical picture most people recognize. You can have low ill-being and high well-being, the complete mental health that only 17% of adults achieve. You can have high ill-being and high well-being, suffering, but still finding meaning and connection. Think of someone navigating serious illness who reports unexpected gratitude and depth. And most importantly, you can have low ill-being and low well-being. No diagnosable disorder, nothing obviously wrong, and yet hollow, stuck, going through the motions. This 4th state is languishing, and the research shows it affects the majority of the population. This is why Rowling's story is not just inspirational, it is scientifically precise. She was not just depressed, she was also not flourishing. And these require different things to address. Let me show you what the data reveals, because the numbers are more striking than most people expect. In Keyes' landmark study of over 3,000 adults, only 17.2% met the criteria for flourishing. A further 12.1% were classified as languishing, no diagnosable mental illness, but severely limited well-being. The remaining majority were neither flourishing nor ill, stranded in what Keyes called the grey zone of moderate mental health. But here is the finding that should concern all of us. Adults who were languishing were nearly 6 times more likely to develop a major depressive episode than those who were flourishing. Languishing is not neutral. It is not simply the absence of a problem. It is a slow erosion of the psychological foundations that protect us. And here is the finding that should give us hope. When researchers followed the same people over 10 years, half of those who were languishing had genuinely improved. Not because time healed them automatically, but because mental health is dynamic, not fixed. It changes, it responds, it moves. Where you are today is not where you are destined to stay. The third finding comes from the frontier of neuroscience. Researchers studying how our biology responds to different types of well-being made a remarkable discovery. Your immune cells respond differently to a life of meaning versus a life of mere pleasure. A purpose-driven life, one built around growth, connection, and contribution, was associated with patterns of gene expression that reduce inflammation and strengthen immunity. A pleasure-driven life without deeper meaning was not. In other words, your body knows the difference between happiness that goes deep and happiness that stays shallow, and it responds accordingly. So, what do you actually do? The research is clear. You need a two-pronged approach, reducing what is wrong and actively building what is right. These are complementary and partially distinct. Here are the 3 most evidence-based tools for making the journey. Tool 1. Activate the upward spiral. Psychologist Barbara Fredrickson identified a precise psychological mechanism behind the transition from ill-being to well-being. Positive emotions broaden your thinking, and broadened thinking builds psychological resources, which generate more positive emotions. This is the upward spiral, and it is self-reinforcing once activated. The key insight is that the positive emotions do not need to be large or dramatic. Small, frequent moments of genuine positive experience, connection, quiet awe, moments of laughter or beauty are the documented activators. Here is how to use it today. 3 times a day, pause for 30 seconds and consciously notice one thing that is good, beautiful, or meaningful in your immediate experience. Not a journal. Active, real-time noticing. Research shows this simple practice begins shifting how your mind scans the world within just 2 weeks. Rowling activated this spiral through writing, not because writing made her happy, but because it gave her moments of absorption, mastery, and meaning. Small doses, daily, compounding over time. Tool 2. Separate your treatment from your growth. One of the most practically important findings in this field is that reducing ill-being and building well-being require partially different strategies. If you are addressing anxiety, depression, or chronic stress, evidence-based treatments like CBT or mindfulness-based therapy are your primary tools. They work, but they are not sufficient to produce flourishing. For the well-being dimension, research consistently points to a separate set of practices: purpose in life exercises, compassion practices, meaning-making, and social connection. Some of the most rigorous research on well-being consistently shows that combining purpose-based psychological practices with physical movement produces the greatest gains in flourishing, gains that go well beyond simply reducing symptoms. Here is how to use it today. Write for 20 minutes about your best possible future self, not a fantasy, but a realistic vision of your life in 5 years, if you worked consistently toward your values. Research by psychologist Laura King shows this single exercise improves both well-being and physical health. It builds the flourishing dimension directly, something no amount of symptom reduction alone can achieve. Tool 3. Build social well-being deliberately. Keyes' model identifies social well-being as a distinct third dimension of flourishing, separate from how you feel emotionally and how you function psychologically. You can feel reasonably good internally and still be languishing in your social dimension. The Harvard study of adult development, the longest-running study of human flourishing ever conducted, spanning over 80 years and multiple generations, found that the quality of close relationships was the single strongest predictor of flourishing across an entire lifetime. Not wealth, not achievement, not intelligence, relationships. Here is how to use it today. Identify one relationship in your life that has faded, not broken, just neglected. Send one message this week. Not a planned catch-up or a phone call. One genuine, specific message that says, "I was thinking about you." Research shows that the act of deliberate reconnection produces measurable well-being gains, even before the relationship is fully restored. The intention itself activates the mechanism. We opened with a number. Only 17% of adults are flourishing. Now you know what that number actually means, and more importantly, you know why it does not have to stay that way. The science is unambiguous. The absence of illness is not the presence of health. Fixing what is broken is necessary, but it is not sufficient. Flourishing requires its own deliberate attention, its own specific practices, its own upward spiral, activated small and often, until the momentum becomes self-sustaining. Rowling did not wait until she felt better to begin the journey. She began the journey through purpose, through daily writing, through the small act of creating meaning in the darkness, and the feeling better followed. Rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. That is not a metaphor. That is a psychological mechanism, and it is available to every single one of us. The most important finding from this entire body of research is this: well-being is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you choose, and choosing it, even imperfectly, even in small daily doses, is enough to begin the upward spiral. Where you are today is not where you are destined to stay. If this video gave you something useful, a framework, a tool, a different way of seeing your own journey, subscribe to this channel. Every week we translate psychological research into practical science-backed tools that help you navigate from struggle to strength. Next week, we are going to examine one of the most counterintuitive findings in the resilience literature, and it will change the way you think about adversity entirely. The journey continues, and you do not have to walk it without a map.